Welcome to Night Talks, the University of Florida College of Journalism and Communications talk show produced by students for students. I'm Maha Nahiri, a senior studying advertising, and our guest today is Leigh Radford, a CJC graduate who spent over 30 years in leadership roles with Procter Gamble, building and growing brands such as Olay and Vicks, and now she's a board member for multiple organizations, including the EW Scripps Company and Goodwill Industries International. Hi, Leigh. Thank you so much for being here today.
It's great to be here.
You earned your bachelor's degree in advertising from UF's College of Journalism and Communications. What drew you to the field of advertising?
You know, what drew me was a combination of creative and business, and that's what I felt the advertising industry did, and I absolutely loved it. And I've always had a creative side of me, but I've always loved that business, and I wanted to really see the business side of advertising come forward. And the experience I got here was astronomical. I still think about my campaigns class, but I minored in business. And the live experience I had on campus, where I led many student groups and different creativity articulations on the accent. I don't know if that's even still here today, or the celebration, which is a fine arts celebration. So I was able to take my advertising and put it into different type of campaigns, even when I was here on campus, that took me and gave me a portfolio before I even left. It's interesting, I was just pulling out my old portfolio as I was cleaning out, and all the things that I did at UF were really the cornerstone of experience that led to me getting eventually into Procter Gamble.
After college, you worked for Eastern Continental Airlines. What was your responsibility as manager of sales, planning, and development?
Well, airlines, a lot of people don't know airlines has a sales force, and it was right after deregulation, and we were out there selling our packages. So meeting packages, travel for corporate planning and corporate meetings. And so I was responsible for a lot of the planning organization of the sales force. So I started off in sales, where I was out calling on corporations and calling on travel agents. And then I was promoted into a planning position where I helped organize and plan the needs of what the sales organization, needed corporately to be successful.
And what inspired you to pursue a master's degree in business administration from the Northwestern University at this time?
I always wanted to go back for my MBA. I think the passion for business, and I also knew I wanted to aspire to even greater heights, and I wanted to have that master's behind me. At the time, I was in the travel business. I thought I may stay in the airline business. And Northwestern had an amazing international business and travel business and marketing business, so I was able to focus on those concentrations when I went back to school.
And what made you stray away from the airline industry?
Well, I graduated in '91, and although I love the industry, it's very, very tough. It's a tough business, and I saw a lot of it, which was a bit challenging at times. And I wanted a little something more stable. Procter Gamble had come to me, even though I had a lot of my resume focused on airlines and travel, and said, hey, would you consider coming to P&G? And so I strayed because I knew P&G was an amazing company that would give me an amazing career and could take me back really to my marketing and advertising roots, which it beautifully did.
How did you get your first opportunity with Procter Gamble?
They interviewed me on campus. So they approached me and said, hey, I know your airline background and your resume, but you look like an amazing leader. Would you consider coming to P&G? So I interviewed and I got my position at Procter Gamble, and then 31 plus years later, I eventually retired.
And brand manager over oral care products, what were your main goals and challenges?
I started in the oral care category at P&G, and that includes big brands such as Crest and Scope, and those were our main big businesses. And I also did some innovation there. And as an assistant brand manager, or when you start in a company, you learn the ropes. You learn about how do you do your marketing forecast, your planning, your advertising, the positioning of the brands, and of course, new product development.
And how did those goals and challenges change when you became the brand manager for personal cleansing products?
Well, personal cleansing, you always want to advance, and there was an opportunity to get a brand manager position where you really start owning the P&L of the business. And so I was able to move into, first of all, a global safeguard job, but then the Ivory business, where I ran the Ivory business, which is P&G's longest standing brand. Actually, one of the first brands that brought branding into the world. And so it was a classic brand, and I was able to run a business and continue to grow it and develop it, and then just continue on from there.
And what are some of the campaigns you did for Ivory?
Well, it's very interesting. Ivory is over a 100-year-old brand. Everyone probably knows it. 99 and 44, 100% pure, and it had a lot of history, but it also became a little bit outdated. And at the same time, we brought new innovation that brought a more moisturizing care to the business. So I had a new brand, a new product within the brand that I was looking to market, and we brought back the Ivory baby. And that's how Ivory started, gentle enough for your baby. And that was an amazing campaign that really launched the business, 50 years plus ago, and we brought it back. I even brought back Brooke Shields, who was one of our original Ivory babies, and started to do that with the brand as well. So it was an amazing opportunity and just a classic brand. Having those opportunities to work on those businesses is a delight.
You became the marketing director of global skin products. How was this role different than the previous two?
It starts getting broader. When you become a marketing director, you have multiple brands underneath you, you have bigger organizations, and I always wanted to get into beauty. So Ivory was my first step into the beauty business, and then Olay was just an amazing business we had acquired from Richardson Vicks and had a big growth opportunity. And so I started in the personal cleansing part of Olay and their body wash business, and then moved into their main skincare. And did that for many years. And it was also a big global business. Ivory was a US business. We were also in Canada, but mainly it was a US business. As we went into Olay, we were in over 140 markets around the world. And so then I got global marketing and global brand creation and campaign development. And that was just a lot of fun. And it was a business and brand that kind of had, also similar to Ivory, it needed to be refreshed. Everyone thought of Olay as oil of Olay. You're probably too young to even know that, but that was originally the name, and people thought it was for their grandmother, and oil, why would I put that on my face? And so we dropped the oil of, really relaunched it as Olay, and it became an amazing 10, 12 years of rapid growth.
And you then held several vice president general manager positions from Procter Gamble skincare, Vicks, and Olay brands. How were you able to influence their growth and success?
Those were amazing career jobs. So I started on Olay, as I had mentioned, and I was there for many years. And we had grown we introduced Total Effects, which was the first time we went from a $7.99 average retail to over $19 for a jar of beauty, skin products. And then we launched Regenerous, which literally is synonymous with Olay today, and introducing those, and that's really how the brand grew. And then I expanded it around the world, along with some great campaigns. The Love Your Skin You're In campaign was just an amazing, because it was a way of letting women, and some men use Olay as well, a lot of people don't know that, they should, for all of you viewers, and it just allowed us to really reposition the brand on a global basis. And to the campaign idea, we were able to say, love the skin you're in, regardless of who you are and what is the background. There's not one definition of beauty, and that was really important for us to say. And the brand responded really well on that.
And so what are the challenges you had as a senior vice president?
Even doing global campaigns, when you have multiple markets that, some are more successful than others. And, I do believe in what we've learned, that the global consumer is very similar, but there is a nuance. And those nuances are really important when you're talking to consumers and trying to get them to buy your products. And so one of the biggest challenges, I had as a vice president running those businesses is how do you get a campaign together so it looked the brand looked like it was one brand, so on packaging and artwork and look and feel, and just bringing those together, and then also making sure consumer insights, as we did local commercial shoots and others that would bring local insights in, but the brand was still a unified brand. And we did that on Vicks as well. And Vicks is also a very old established business, again in over 150 markets. But it was more fractured, and it was also a more complex business from a regulatory standpoint, what you could say and couldn't say. In the United States, NyQuil is one of our big sub-brands. In some markets, NyQuil didn't exist. So how do you think about growing a big business when even the lineup isn't the same? And so those are some of the challenges of how do you really think about growing an entire business while growing an equity that is critical for the long-term success. And we had an amazing campaign on Vicks called Breathe Life In. And it goes again back to the heritage of Vicks, which was the Sinex brand and Vapor Rub. A lot of people know about Vapor Rub and breathing in when you're not feeling well. And that is still a big insight today around the world. And so we really went back to that insight of Breathe Life In to feel better for all of our line of respiratory products.
And do you have any other favorite campaigns for executions that you've had a hand in?
Yeah, gosh, there were many. We talked about the Ivory one. I also, probably, my Ivory was just the return of pureness was a big one. But I think those are the two big, and they lasted many, many years. A really good campaign is right are the ones that you really invest over the years.
And what goes into a successful campaign?
Great question. The number one advice I give anyone going into advertising is really the partnership with the corporate side of advertising and the agency side of advertising. Some of my best friends today came from the agency side. And we were really responsible for growing the brand, the business, and the strategy. But making that come alive, I really relied on the creative knowledge and expertise of our agency partners. And really by having that magic and really working on those relationships is probably the biggest advice I will say on any piece of advertising, but especially global campaigns, because it's really important that that core strategic group really understands and are together on what the future of that brand is. So when you go to execute it country after country after country, it stays together.
And what were some of the challenges that you had with going on an international scale?
Yeah, the biggest challenges we had is just keeping it together, because we didn't do a lot of local production, or like global production that we centralized. We still did it out in the market, and so we just needed to make sure that strategy was so clear and the design elements were so clear and the logo was so clear, and really making sure that everything and the guardrails of the brand, and then also leave the flexibility for the creativity on the local insights that we talked earlier. I think that's the biggest challenge. And just motivating everyone, because sometimes there are markets that may believe something else is better than what you're trying to propose on a global scale. And one thing that I found worked really well is to allow them to test it, because good ideas come from everywhere. And sometimes our great ideas, Pantene is another example. I didn't work on Pantene, but our global Pantene came out of Japan, that wonderful hair flip shot. And so if we didn't allow for local creativity, I'm not sure that would have been the global campaign or visualization of the campaign. So I think it's about pulling it together, but with enough flexibility and listening to the people in the markets that are closer to the consumer in a lot of regard, and then test and learn and evolve, and always know that you're not always right.
From a leadership standpoint, how do you keep everyone else motivated in these situations?
A lot is gaining that enrollment, the trust that you build with the relationship with your agency and also your organization. I'm truly a believer that great leaders are built on trust and believing in others. and believing in their ideas and testing their ideas, knowing that your ideas are never right, not always right. Sometimes they are right, but it's not always right. And I think the biggest thing is just really opening up with your agencies in particular, especially going global, that you allow that flexibility and the listening to evolve.
You founded P&G Ventures in 2015, serving as Senior Vice President, General Manager. What is P&G Ventures and how did it become to be?
Well, it's very interesting. P&G Ventures, a lot of people know about this surge of startups that were taking place and really starting to eat at some of the big corporations, and especially on recruiting. We were losing a lot of great people going to more of a startup world. And we also knew some amazing innovation was coming out of startups and venture. And so I was approached by the chairman of the company and asked if I would think about coming in and helping to create new brands for Procter Gamble. And it wasn't necessarily something I wanted to do, believe it or not. I came to P&G to run big global multi-billion-dollar businesses. And what was needed is creation of new brands. And P&G had always been known as creating new categories, such as Swiffer or Febreze or Pampers or Pringles, and we needed some more of those. And we started getting a lot of pressure on the street saying, hey, we need to see that local innovation coming. Well, what was so interesting on my Vicks experience and also on my Olay experience, I was one of those vice presidents, general managers that created brands from brands. We talked on Olay about Regenerist and Total Effects, which were really what step changed the growth of that business. Similar to our Vicks brand, I introduced ZzzQuil. Hopefully you guys have all heard of ZzzQuil. And that was just a major win. So I was really approached by the CEO of the time to, we need more brands. How can you help us create brands? And even though it wasn't something I necessarily wanted to do, I wanted to take on the challenge, and I definitely wanted to support the company. And I realized going into the venture world was a good way of doing that and looking and working with startups and innovating in a different way. What I knew is the way we had innovated in the past may not be the way we need to innovate in the future. So I created a venture group, roughly 150 individuals, both on all technical sides, marketing, the full lot. And we both worked both internally and externally to find unique technologies or brands or ideas that met big unmet needs. And that's how P&G Ventures was born.
Can you provide some examples of successful new brand launches under P&G Ventures and how you were able to foster innovation?
We launched 4 brands when I was there, which was a pretty big clip. And then we were working on 25 more in our portfolio. Probably the one we like to talk about most is Zevo. And Zevo is still a fairly new brand, but it's growing amazing. And Zevo takes Procter & Gamble into the non-toxic insect control space. And that was a big industry that needed disruption because there was no disruption and most of the products that were out there were fairly toxic. And we wanted to provide, and consumers wanted, without the harm to their family or pets. And that is what we found. And that was one of our big breakthrough innovations. We found the innovations by looking with and working with startups from all over the country, a little technology out of Vanderbilt, a little technology out of Los Angeles, a little technology out of Boston, and brought it together and created an amazing brand. So tough on bugs, but safe on families.
And with a 30-year career at Procter & Gamble, what was it like climbing through the ranks within one organization rather than leaving? And how did the culture there encourage internal career advancement?
I loved having a corporate career, loved it. But I was also in a corporation that had a lot of options. We had over 150 brands, 150 markets. So the ability of growth was so huge. And they did an amazing job of continuing to challenge and grow and advance and prepare leaders for senior level positions. It's not to say I never thought about leaving, but when I did look, I always compared to what I had, and I always wanted to stay.
And where do you see the advertising industry going from here?
Wow, it's changing rapidly. I mean, it's already changed very quickly in my career time frame. I mean, everything that's in front of us is AI, right? And the creative content that can come out of that. You're already seeing the consolidation. The role of creativity and creatives, I think, is going to continue to evolve. I mean, the media is changing so quickly of how people are absorbing advertising and what they're willing to sit through or what they're willing to engage in will continue to evolve. So, both from the media, the creative, and even the industry, how it is created is very different. Back in the early days, we would spend sometimes up to $1 million on an advertising production. You don't really need to do that anymore. And so even production is changing. And so it's going to be an amazing industry to continue to be part of. But I think the one thing that will stay the same is the need for creative consumer insights and advertising and creative that opens the minds and hearts of consumers to think about your product differently.
In the advertising field, there's a lot of research that goes on, and how important is that research and that goes into that?
Yeah, the one thing about research that is changing dramatically is how instant it is. And one example, we talked about Olay when I did that global campaign. I mean, the amount of research and money we spent to qualify Regenerous was staggering. But we also knew we had really one chance to get it right, because the way that the media worked at that time, you would go vertical investment because you had to get them on those shelves. And so you'd spend millions and millions of dollars right out the gate. And if you didn't have it right, it leads to pretty disastrous consequences. And now, especially what I learned in ventures, on Zevo, we would literally launch iteration of creative and content and advertising and messaging and insight that we could do within 24 hours and just get research back so you could perfect what your message was and your creative articulation with very, very little cost, money, or time.
We spoke about your advertising career, but who was behind that and helped you to achieve all those goals that you had?
Yeah, you need a team. You really need a team. I have my husband, John. He's also a fellow Gator. Has been supportive of me from day one. He's the one that, literally packed things up, followed me to Northwestern, followed me to Cincinnati, built his career, and while really enabling me. And being a global leader, I travel a lot. I mean, around the world, a lot. And so I also have twin boys who are now 18. They're seniors in high school, hopefully future Gators. But I needed that support staff. And it extends out to my parents and my family, but they were never local. But I attribute a lot to my family and John, but also all of my mentors, my bosses, my friends, those networks, that, the expression, it takes a village, it does take a village. And I could never have accomplished what I did without the support of the people around me.
And as a woman, how do you navigate everything? And what was your experience in the advertising field?
Sometimes it was a lot, but to the point of having those support staff and having people you trust. We talked trust earlier in the interview, and which is what I believe is the number one thing for success in business. And it's not only trusting the people who work under you, but trust the people above you and the people around you. And when you kind of have an environment of trust, it provides an amazing support system around you to get things done. I could never have done my career without that support beams all around me.
Since retiring from Procter Gamble in early 2022, you've become an industry advisor for Cross Creek, as well as board member for Fast Studios, Heaven Hill Brands, VF Corporations, Women's Sports Network, and the EW Scripps Company. Tell us about the work you're involved in now.
Sure. It sounds a lot. Most of it's board work, and that was always a vision for me. I love corporate business, and I always wanted to even look at that and participate on a board level. And so I had the wonderful opportunity, but something I worked even before I retired from P&G, that I knew this was where my next path was going to be. I love the Scripps Company. It kind of takes me back to the roots on early, broadcast and advertising, and it's such a changing industry. Interesting, along with that, I'm on Fast Studios, which is a startup where we're into the connected TV space and providing new content for all the connected TVs that are out there. And we just launched Women's Sports Network, which is the first all-exclusive women's sports channel that's available for consumers today, and we're very pleased with how that's doing as well. And then I do some venture work, staying close with startups. So Cross Creek Ventures, where I'm an advisor, as well as VF Corporation. You probably know that by North Face and Vans and Timberland and things like that. And we just spun off their venture group into Wild Creek Ventures. And that's very similar to what I did at Procter Gamble. We didn't spin off, but having that experience of how do you create venture within a big corporation. And I still wanted to give back and do a lot in that regard. And then also nonprofit. So Goodwill International, a lot of people don't know that's close to an $8 billion nonprofit and one of the biggest contributors of getting people off of federal aid and, removing barriers for individuals to really, get their feet under them and provide productivity to their family and themselves. And that has been amazing. And I'm working very close with this CMO. We just launched a new campaign on global goodwill because a lot of people totally misunderstand that brand and what they do for people in our communities. And so being able to take my advertising and campaign work and put it towards real good and growth has been a delight.
That's amazing. And what advice do you have for someone like me who will be entering the advertising industry?
It's an amazing industry, changing very quick. One thing I always say, and I think I see this a lot with people in advertising or broadcasting or any of the fields here, is there's a big passion. We pick those careers because we're passionate. And so the biggest advice is follow your passion and continue to evolve where the industry is evolving. So don't think there's one way to think of advertising. Even when I was here, I don't think I even had the visibility of the corporate side of advertising. Everyone thought about agencies. And I love the agency side, but I love even more the corporate side. So keep your eyes open and go explore, but follow your passion and continue to make the change in this industry that is available to us.
Thank you for your insight, Leigh, and thank you for giving me some advice on the advertising industry. And thank you for our viewers for joining us today. Until next time, good night.